Welcome in, everyone, to the Full Court Trap podcast coming here on this Monday post another epic college basketball weekend. We had a lot of action, a lot of heavyweight battles between SEC schools, Big 12, Big East, all across the board. We talked about St. John's yesterday, me and Blake over there taking control of first place in the Big East. And another team that took control of first in their conference, the Auburn Tigers, they were already there, but they just put even more space between them and Alabama in that epic battle over in the state of Alabama this weekend on Saturday, Coleman Coliseum. Final score 94-85. Auburn, comes out on top over Alabama in that 1-versus-2 battle. Brandie, I'll start with you, the resident Auburn fan on the podcast. It'd be wrong to start anywhere else. So the floor is yours. What do you think about this battle? It lived up to the game of the year billing, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm completely shocked coming away from that game, knowing that Auburn led wire to wire. Bama never had the lead in the game, and a lot of that had to do with the start that Janai Broom had. He has probably been hearing some of the noise about how he's not deserving of National Player of the Year, and Cooper Flag is, but he came out of the gate just absolutely on fire on offense and just didn't back down from there. Um, and the guard room was incredible on both ends of the floor. Denver Jones holding Mark Sears to one of his worst games this season from the floor. Just absolutely incredible game on both ends of the floor. Chad Baker-Mazara also had a great game offensively and defensively. And Tahad Pettiford just coming through. Primetime Pettiford is what they're calling him. His offensive stats against ranked opponents has been pretty incredible for a freshman this year. And there were times in that game where Alabama either tied the game or went on a small run, and Auburn just never backed down on offense. So statement win. I think Auburn is very clearly the number one overall seed with a pretty nice 1 to 2 game buffer now, which I don't think we had before this game. So really exciting as an Auburn fan, and just gotta keep the boys going. The rest of Auburn's conference schedule to finish out is not terribly hard, but there are some opportunities to kind of get caught off guard. Going to Kentucky on the road and Texas A&M on the road, and still have to play Bama again another time. So great game though Saturday.
Yeah, as a neutral observer, Blake, I was just really impressed with Auburn's ability to respond. Anytime that Alabama went on some kind of mini run there to get the crowd into it, I remember at one point in that game, the Coliseum was going absolutely nuts when they tied it at one point in the second half. And they had those spurts throughout the game where they would try to close that gap. But every time, Auburn just came back right away with an answer. And they looked like a team that is the best team in the country. They weren't fazed by the pressure. Bruce Pearl said it. They played like the best team in the country. They acted like the best team in the country, and they are the best team in the country. So what stood out to you the most here, Blake?
Probably just their intensity on defense. They held Alabama to just 5 made threes on the night, 19% from behind the arc, and that's a crazy feature to do against one of the best scoring teams and like fastest playing tempo teams in the game. So that really stood out to me. And then, like Brandie said, Denver Jones, he's really starting to come alive right now, and his breakout over the past like 5 games has been really incredible to watch.
Yeah, he locked down Mark Sears, who we know what he's capable of when he gets it going. One of the best guards in the country. He's the guy that kind of gets that Alabama team going. And you saw in this game when he was out of rhythm, it just made it really hard on Alabama because it felt like at points in the second half when things wouldn't start to work, their perimeter shots weren't falling. They were just trying to drive it into the teeth of the Auburn defense. And that really wasn't working very well for them at all. And Brandie, you mentioned that Auburn's kind of got a manageable schedule down the stretch here. On the other side of things, Alabama, they do not have a manageable schedule whatsoever. They've got to go to Missouri immediately following this game on Saturday. Then they're going to host Kentucky. They've got Mississippi State and Tennessee still. They're going to have to play Auburn again at the end of the regular season. And before that, they also have to play Florida. So things aren't getting any easier for the Crimson Tide here. And I don't know if Alabama fans really feel like this was a missed opportunity because it kind of seemed like that Auburn was the best team the whole game and they just weren't going to fall on that day. But it's got to hurt if you're a Crimson Tide fan.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of felt like a must win if they wanted to still compete for the SEC title race. But it's really interesting. They still out rebounded Auburn, and that's something that Florida really gave Auburn trouble with this year, and we weren't able to overcome that against home. But they still stuck to their core. The thing is, though, I don't think that Alabama really made a ton of adjustments, and their drop coverage on defense is going to be a real issue. And some of the lineups that they put out there, not sure what was going on there. So they have to find a way to kind of cover up Jaron Stevenson and his lack of production this year if they want to continue trying to compete for the SEC title. But they have some tough games coming up.
Speaking of Jaron Stevenson, man, he completely blew a layup at one point going down the stretch there that could have absolutely turned the momentum in that game. That was just brutal. It felt like some of those guys just weren't ready for the moment there. And I was really impressed too. I mean, granted, Alabama did have a bad shooting night, but Brandie, we talked about it on the preview. You kind of thought that Auburn trying to go band for band with Alabama's offense wasn't really going to work, but they outclassed them in this one on this occasion at least.
Yeah, no, that was a good call on your part. They did that, and they did it from behind the arc too, which was kind of, a little bit surprising. I think that just shows the confidence that this staff had in Auburn's defense. Um, Basically knowing that their perimeter defense has been strong all year, minus the Florida game. That's really the only game that the perimeter defense hasn't been good. I think that really speaks to that coaching staff just having a lot of confidence in the defense.
Yeah. And Blake, before we move on from Alabama's side of things here, well, we obviously mentioned that rough stretch they have down here going down the rest of the SEC play. I think it's number one in strength of schedule ranking here. It feels
Mhm.
like this team's going to have to figure some things out defensively if they're really going to bunker down and win some of these games. I don't know what you think about that, but it just feels like at times this Bama team has a tendency to let opponents just kind of get what they want.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they've won a crap ton of games this year. I think they're sitting at like 21-4, but I feel like every game they're allowing like 80 plus points a game. And when you're talking about like going against some of the best teams in all the country, that's not really like a winning recipe whenever you're in March. I think you got to lock down more on the defensive end because that's really what will eventually like allow you to win championships. So this team definitely here before the March Madness bracket selection show, uh, before that starts, they need to get their defense in check.
Speaking of March Madness on the bracket selection show, you just actually jogged my mind on something. We talked about it yesterday, Blake. I want to get Brandy's thoughts real quick. So, the committee said that this game it wouldn't really like determine who exactly was the number one overall seed at this point. I mean, obviously Auburn's going to hold on to that, but I think they were saying more so if Bama pulled one off here. But now in hindsight, Bama loses this game. Do we still think that Alabama's deserving of that second overall one seed, or do you think this pushes up a team like Duke or like Florida? Because I made the case that I don't think it really moves Alabama too much just because of the overall strength of resume. I know Duke fans probably believe this moves them up the totem pole, but I just think that Duke's lack of resume opportunities in the ACC might kind of hold them back from that. I don't know if you agree with me on that. That's just kind of the takeaway I had when it comes to the seating purposes right after that selection show preview yesterday.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I still think Bama's deserving of that number 2 spot on the 1 seed line. They have the second highest strength of schedule right behind Auburn. So losing to the best team in the country to me shouldn't really knock you down a line. And both Duke and Florida, they're in the top 40. I think Florida is in the top 50, 55, something like that for Duke. So yeah, I maybe if Bama drops another one this week, then I could see it happening. But until that happens, I still think I still think Bama's deserving of that too on the 1 overall. But a lot of basketball is still left to be played, so we'll see what happens. Especially since Florida and Alabama are going to play each other too down the stretch, and It's tough though because the two to me like Florida has the best win in all of college basketball, which is Auburn on the road. And I think Duke maybe has an argument for the second best win. So it'll be interesting to see how they factor in head to head since Duke beat Auburn and Florida beat Auburn, and we'll see what happens in Florida Bama. So I'll be curious to see how much they factor that in. But Bama's non-con strength of schedule and just overall general strength of schedule is really helping them stay in that 2 overall spot.
Yeah, this race down the stretch is going to be really interesting, and obviously this won't be the last of this matchup we see. Alabama's still got to head down to the jungle in the last game of the regular season, so we're blessed we get that matchup twice, but that's enough for now. We'll move over to the Big 12, where there was another pretty big game. The number 6 ranked Houston Cougars, they went into Arizona, the number 13 ranked Wildcats, and they won in a low scoring 162-58. Blake, this really it had all of the tones of a Houston basketball game: low scoring, slow pace. Defense kind of took control of the game there. I know you picked Arizona in the preview, so how'd you feel about this one? You had to be a little bit disappointed there with the Wildcats letting you down.
Yeah, from a prediction standpoint, I'm pretty upset with the Wildcats. Caleb Love, you failed me, but if you're a fan of like gritty basketball and not really like so much on the offensive end, then this is definitely a game for you. I mean, 62-58 final score. I mean, some people might like look at that and think it's a snooze fest, but that game was head-to-head, down to the wire the whole time. Arizona went 5 of 23 from 3. Houston matched the threes made in just 17 attempts. So, I mean, really bad shooting night for both teams, but like you said, this had all the makings of a Houston game. They were able to go into one of the toughest road environments in all of college basketball, with that being Arizona, and to get that win against a red-hot Arizona team, it's phenomenal to say the least.
Yeah, and this is an Arizona team that was down in the dumps coming out of non-conference, and then on that selection preview, they're on the 3 line right now. So this isn't a terrible loss for them, but Brandie, this is another one, like I mentioned, with Auburn and Alabama being pivotal in the SEC. This one was pivotal in the Big 12 as well, because now Houston has firm control of that first spot up there in that conference, 2-game advantage over Texas Tech and Arizona. So the Cougars showed up in a big-time spot here, and it was obviously a very impressive win there.
Yeah, I've been pretty high on Houston all year, and so I was excited to see them go there and get that win. I think I stuck with them in our predictions. And for them, they just have to play their style of basketball, and if they are allowed to do that and can do that, they're going to win these games. Arizona did play them really close, and I still do like this Arizona team heading into March and down the stretch. But I was really impressed with Milos Uzan for Houston. He really stepped up offensively for them and kind of has done that the last couple of weeks. I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but they really kind of in non-con play like didn't have a real offensive identity. And between Juwan Roberts, Milos Uzan, and obviously LJ Cryer, they really kind of found a little bit of offensive identity. They don't really need a ton as long as they're able to play their style of kind of hard-nosed defensive basketball. But I like this Houston team, and I think they're vying for a 1 seed. Not really sure if they're going to be able to get it, considering their two of their losses in non-con were to Auburn and Alabama, which doesn't help them at all. But this Cougars team is legit, and their defense is insane. So, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned Miles Uzon. He's been hooping down the stretch as we've gone in through the meat of Big 12 play, and he's stepped up big time. You mentioned that they lacked a scoring identity in non-conference, and that was a big thing that we talked about months ago. It felt like they were just missing that guy. Like last year, we've talked about it repeatedly where they had Jamal Shed. He could just go get you one when you needed it. But there's guys that are stepping up on this team like an LJ Cryer, like a Milos Uzon, and the supporting cast around him as well. I mean, Tugler and Roberts, those guys are studs. And then on the Arizona side of things, I agree with what you said there. I still like this team and their potential. It's always kind of scary, though, when you're betting on a team that has Caleb Love at the center of an offense going into March because he's just so volatile. You never know what you're going to get. But if the guys around them like KJ Lewis and Tommy Townsend, Toby Awaka, Jaden Bradley, if they can get it going, then I think they're going to have some success in the postseason. But another thing we talked about, me and Blake, on the 2 seed line, when you mentioned Houston's vying for a 1 spot there, Brandie, we were kind of surprised that Tennessee got that number 1 2 seed look over Houston. Me and Blake both kind of agreed that we thought Houston was a little bit more deserving of that. What do you think about that one? I think this might be another win that boosts their profile a little bit more up the 2 seed charts as they move into trying to catch a 1 seed. But what do you think about that when the reveal happened?
I was kind of shocked by that one. And obviously that was before this weekend's games had happened. But I mean, Houston has one less loss than Tennessee, and their strength of schedule is pretty similar. And I don't know, I don't understand, I guess, the media and the committee's I don't know, enamor with Tennessee. I don't like that basketball team, and I don't think that they have the strongest resume per se. So I don't think it's going to stay like that because I think Houston's a better basketball team, and I think Tennessee has kind of a little bit tougher of a schedule down the stretch. So I was surprised by that. Yeah, to say the least, I was surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make the case for Iowa State, or not Iowa State, excuse me, I'm looking at Houston's schedule here. They play Iowa State, and then they're also going to get chances against Texas Tech and Kansas, and also Baylor, which is a quad one win at this point, maybe not the biggest win there. So there's going to be chances for them to move up into the 1 seed territory if those teams that are kind of towards the bottom, like Duke and Florida, if they maybe drop one. But Blake, call your shot right now. Do we think that this Houston team can find their way into a 1 seed potentially, or does it kind of seem like they may be destined for a 2 with just how quality those top 4 teams are at the moment?
I feel like they're kind of stuck at the 2 spot just because how, like you said, how good those 1 seeds really are. I mean, it's just going to kind of be impossible at this rate to get up to a 1 seed, I feel like.
Brandie, do you think it's impossible for them with that one line being just so quality this year?
Impossible, no, but they have an uphill battle. But they, like you said, they have, plenty of opportunities to boost their resume. So yeah, I think it's tough though with just how much separation there is from that 1 seed line to the rest of the field. And I actually think Lenardi or some bracketologist put out there today that basically after Houston, they're like, there's no chance that those teams getting a 1 seed essentially. So Houston and anybody up have 1 seed chances. Anybody after Houston doesn't. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them. And then moving on, we got a game that the Full Court Trap Pod kind of cursed. We all thought Purdue was going to make a statement this weekend and get a win at home against Wisconsin. The Mackey Magic was there. It looked like it was going to be a good day for Purdue. They had just gotten revealed to be on the 2 seed line, I believe, in that bracket preview show. And they unfortunately ran into John Tonji and this Wisconsin team that just continues to impress and make noise in the Big Ten. Brandie, what do we think about the Badgers? They went into a place that's really hard to win at, and they got one done here.
yeah, crazy too, because at halftime they were trailing by 1, but man, they really turned it up in the second half. Really, the Chante took over very early on. He scored like 13 of 16 of their points early in the second half on an 11-0 run, I think it was, that they had. I was really impressed by them. I know, like, going into this game, I love John Tonje in his game, but I think I even said on the preview show he's a little bit of a foul baiter. But man, it was really exciting to see him finally get one of those games that we saw from him earlier in the season, kind of back, where he just takes over on offense for them and essentially is lights out. So that was really exciting. And the Wisconsin bench scored 19 points, and they had 3 blocks on the defensive end. Like, really impressed with their bench performance too. So yeah, this was a statement win for Wisconsin, and I'm just like absolutely floored that Purdue did not come away with this. So I really thought that Purdue going into this was kind of playing some of the best basketball that they had played all season, especially offensively. So to kind of see them drop this game at home, after getting revealed to be on the 2 seed line, was kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yep. Blake, now I know you have some thoughts on Purdue that you were getting out before we started the podcast, so the floor is yours. What do you think about the Boilermakers swinging and missing on this opportunity?
It kind of just goes to show that this Purdue team's just as good as Braden Smith, TKR, guys like that. How well those guys play is like how far this team's going to go. And when Braden Smith's going 2 of 10 from the field, sure, he had 12 assists, but I mean, those are just like stat filling, like box score filling stats. They're meaningless. You lost by 10 at the end of the day. You went 2 of 10 from the field. You can't do that as one of the best point guards in the country. You were playing at home in front of one of the best crowd environments and probably the sport of basketball, honestly. And you lose to a Wisconsin team. They're red hot. I give all them the credit. But that's just a game you can't really lose in the spot where you're battling for the lead of the Big Ten. And this is a conference that's really been neck and neck all the way through with like the top 3-4 teams. So losing this game at home, it's kind of detrimental to their conference talks. Brandie said it best. John Tanji, he's an unbelievable player. He went off in that second half, just completely took over that game. But yeah, Purdue, I'm just scared for them going forward because that's just a game you can't really blow like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned them when Braden Smith doesn't really get going, it's kind of hard for them to find rhythm, and that's very true. And that's one of the big concerns I have about this team. Just outside of Kaufman, Wren, and Braden Smith, like who's going to be the guy that goes and gets you buckets when things aren't working? Is it going to be Fletcher Lawyer, CJ Cox? I don't know. This team, they're definitely a good team, and they've got a good resume. But the concerns are there for me, Brandie. I don't know if you match those concerns, but it just kind of worries me when you're so heavily relying on like 1 to 2 guys to get you buckets. And when Braden was off in this game, I mean, you saw what happened.
Yeah, I mean, all they really did was just feed TKR. It just wasn't enough to overcome Wisconsin's offense because, I mean, that's what happens when your starting point guard does what he did. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with what Blake said. They're only going to go as far as Braden Smith will be able to take them. I do feel bad because I feel like Braden Smith had been playing his best ball too. So, just kind of really unlucky night for him to have the type of night that he did, or afternoon rather. But I don't know if, those kind of things happen. Wisconsin's defense isn't anything to like write home about, so it was a little surprising. We'll see how Purdue kind of bounces back, but definitely need to watch Braden Smith for how he performs, I think, throughout the rest of the year because that's going to determine how they do in March. They still have a good coach, and I think TKR still. I thought he had a really good game. So I think there was still some positive takeaways, but yeah, this was a game that they just couldn't drop, and they did. So they have to lock in for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and speaking of games they can't drop, I mean, we're going to preview it here in a little bit, but they got Michigan State tomorrow night in a tough road environment, and that's one that they're going to fall behind really far if they don't get that one and tie for second in the Big Ten right now. So they really need to get things right and figure it out. But all the credit in the world to Wisconsin. Tanji's a player, and that team, they're looking like they're built for a good postseason run and the rest of Big Ten play here. But moving on from that one, my Kentucky Wildcats, they went on the road this weekend and took yet another unranked L. This team continues to just be the most confusing team I've ever seen in my life. Granted, they did not have Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson, but with about 5 minutes to go, they had a 5-point lead. It really feels like they let one slip there, Blake. And I do want to give credit to Texas because Trey Johnson had an unbelievable game. And that whole team, they stepped up in the spot where Kentucky was down a couple of men, and they just got it done in that home environment. But is this Kentucky team just simply not going to be very good until they get healthy? Because that's just kind of the vibe I get. Because all due respect to Travis Perry, when you got a kid that was playing basketball in Lyon County, Kentucky a year ago as your starting point guard in the best conference that we've seen in years, it just feels like this team, they're really capped right now with what they can do.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think this team's very good without J. Rob and Lamont. When you're having Travis Perry, a guy who some people thought wasn't SEC material coming into the season, as a starting point guard. That's not a good thing at all. When you have Kobe Bryant on the road, struggling big time and not hitting a single shot against the bottom of the conference team and a loss, that's not good. Like, this team just doesn't have it right now. Otega Owe, he's been Mr. Consistent all year, but he still shot 6 18 from the field, had 20 points, but that's really inefficient when you're talking about a decent Texas team that's fighting for March Madness. Amari Williams, he continues to be a really good piece for that team. Ansley Almanor, really good player. But we really got to start talking about like Kobe Bryant on the road. This is a guy who was one of the best, if not the best, three-point shooter last year at Dayton. He was one of the best early in the season. And then now we're just seeing him in conference play on the road just struggle game after game. And it's like he can't really get it going. Like, off the rhythm, he's missing. Like, catch and shoot, he's missing. Like, I just don't know where he go from here without Lamont and Jackson Robinson.
Yeah, and their timetable's still unknown where we stand today. Brandie, Blake mentioned Kobe Bryant's importance here, and I have a stat pulled up that I saw earlier today. In Kentucky's 6 SEC wins, he's averaging 11.7 points per game, and then in the 6 losses, he's averaging 6.3 a game. So this team, it's kind of crazy to say they go where a bench player and Kobe Bryant takes them, but I mean, in a game like the one against Texas where he got forced into the starting job with Jackson Robinson out of play, I mean, it just showed even more the importance of him and his scoring ability to this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw a stat too that since the Florida game, Kobe Bryant is shooting like sub 32% from behind the arc or something like that. And it does kind of suck to have to rely on a bench player to get more production, but something's going to have to give because the team just isn't healthy, and you have to find a way to win games though still in this conference if you want to get good seeding and you want to go on a deep March run. But I think the most important thing right now for Kentucky, just health, get healthy. But also at the end of the day, you're not going to win a game where you shoot 25% from three and you also lose the rebounding and turnover battle. And when you run into arguably the best scorer in the conference and Trey Johnson, and Tremont Mark also had an incredible game too for Texas. So I think all three of us ended up saying, okay, we think Texas is going to win this game because of Kentucky's health and because Texas is desperate. They're on the bubble. They're trying to get into the tournament. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where Kentucky goes from here other than they're going to have somebody step up. I think even Andrew Carr, like, he isn't even that healthy either. He got, less than 5 minutes or 6 minutes of play. And he was somebody that was kind of important at the beginning of the year. I mean, he's a big reason why guys were able to beat Duke earlier this season. So, I mean, the whole team is just banged up. So health as well for this Kentucky team if they can get there.
Yeah, and I mean, the other guys we will mention, Trent Noah, he stepped up phenomenally in his expanded role. His injuries have creeped up on this team, but Kentucky, they had the advantage going down the stretch, and it looked like they could pull away. So you can't really make a whole lot of excuses. I mean, health obviously is a big issue. They need their guys. If Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson play in that game, some of the critical errors made down the stretch probably don't happen. And Travis Perry, I mean, he just looked like a deer in headlights. He had a turnover with about 2 minutes left that kind of started the avalanche of Texas just taking control and ultimately winning that game. But this was very predictable. And I mean, we've talked all season long about how Texas, they have the pieces to pull something together, and they did it on this given night. Blake, I know we've talked a lot about the health of Kentucky and how they need to get healthy, but I mean, this could get bad for them if they don't get healthy quick, because they've got a game coming up against Vandy that we'll talk about that they could easily lose, and then they're going to have to travel to Bama. They still got to play Auburn and Missouri, so things aren't getting better anytime quick in terms of the schedule. So health, that has to be the ultimate emphasis of Mark Pope right now, just trying everything he can to get his guys back in the fold.
Yeah, definitely, especially like how you said, their upcoming games, Vanderbilt, that's a extremely scary game after they already lost to them in Bama on the road. If they don't have Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler for that game, then you might as well chalk it up as like a 20, 25-point loss. I don't think it's going to be close at all on the road at Oklahoma. I mean, when they're losing to Texas, who's kind of comparable to Oklahoma, then I mean, I could see them losing that if they don't have Lamont and J. Rob. I'm sure they'll have Lamont back by that Bama game, though. I just don't see him sitting out of a game that like big of a magnitude. And like when you're talking SEC tournament play, uh, or tournament, I mean, and then March Madness seeding, things like that. And it's kind of like a moral win, if you would. Like in this game, you want to play in that game. I'm not going to go out of my way and call it their Super Bowl, but this is going to be a Super Bowl potentially for Kentucky in this one.
Yeah, for sure. And down the stretch, I mean, if this team does get healthy, I mean, I still have faith in them if they get healthy. Brandie is a neutral observer of this Kentucky team. I don't know what you think, but when they do have their guys healthy and Lamont and Jackson are playing their best ball, that this team they can beat anybody, but they can also lose to anybody. So is it really just simply a matter? I know you hinted at it. Getting healthy is obviously important. Do we think they can get back to their winning ways if they do get everybody back?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still a slight believer in this Kentucky team for, them being a decent squad that can see the second weekend in March. They have the offensive firepower when everybody's healthy. The defense definitely needs a lot of love there on that side. But honestly, if they can get healthy and Lamont can come back, he's, the best, I think the best defender on Kentucky's team. So um, this Kentucky team, like from a effort perspective, it's there, and an offensive perspective, when they're healthy, it's there. So I really do think a majority of the problems come down to health, but on the other side of it, maybe a tad bit of depth, which they can't really fix that in the end of the season. But yeah, I think that they can get back a little bit of winning ways with some health. So
Yeah, they got a must-win spot coming up on Wednesday, in my opinion. But we'll move on from them for now and talk about the late night madness that happened on Saturday in the Big 12. Kansas, they went down to the Utes. That was a rough game for Kansas. Really, one of their worst performances of the season. 67-74. Utah gets it done. I was up for this one. I was watching it. Kansas, they just look discombobulated. It looks like a team that's just been, as we've mentioned over and over again, so poorly constructed. And Brandie, it feels like this is a shocking result, but at the same time, with Kansas's struggles that we've talked about over and over again, I'm also not super shocked that this happened.
yeah, see, even though I know Kansas hasn't been good this season, they've had the roster construction, I've said it before, is really bad. This still was a little bit of a shock to me, mostly from like an effort standpoint. Um, Kansas, they just like didn't look like they cared. Utah really kind of set the tone though when they started off the game on like a 10-3 run and forced Bill Self to take a timeout before the first media timeout, or for the first media break. But yeah, I mean, it was crazy. Utah finished the game with 16 offensive rebounds that led to 14 second chance points, and they forced 12 turnovers from Kansas that directly resulted in 22 points. Um, and Utah only turned the ball over 7 times. So to me, this one really just came down to effort, and that was what was more surprising. Not necessarily that they lost, but kind of seems like the players on this team aren't fully bought into this season anymore. Maybe has to do with some of the struggles that they've had, but that to me was more shocking than the actual results of the game. And that's an issue and a problem that I don't know if Bill Self can fix. Can he instill firepower and passion back into this team? Because they do still have a lot of talent on there. I don't know, but I did want to say on this though, shout out to Gabe Madsen on that 3-point shot with, I think there was like 2 minutes left in the game. It was a shot that put Utah up by 7 points, and it made him Utah's all-time 3-point record holder. So I just wanted to give him a shout out because that was electric. What a game and what a win to do it in. That was awesome.
Yeah, Gabe Matson, he was hooping in that game. And Blake, we talked about it yesterday. Kansas, we mentioned them in the top 16 reveal. We thought they were one of the weaker teams on that seed line. Obviously, this was post the Utah game, so we had a little bit more perspective on it. But even still, we've talked about their struggles all season long, and they showed again on this night.
Yeah, it's starting to get really concerning out of this Kansas team. Like I said yesterday in our bracketology recap, or whatever we called it, video over on YouTube, they just have no true identity as a team. They all rely on their bigs to somehow go get a bucket or toss it out for a shot behind the arc, and it's really not a winning recipe. They have zero space, and like I said yesterday, it's just a bunch of big men who can't really spread the floor. Flory Badunga can't shoot at all. KJ Adams, I mean, we've seen him for the past 20 years. He can't shoot at all. Hunter Dickinson's kind of been underwhelming this year, to put it point blank. So it's just not a really good team at all right now. And the fact they're still top 25, I mean, it's deserved, but it's starting to get really concerning at this rate.
They're going to end up falling out of that if they keep stumbling the way that they are. But a team that already stumbled out of the top 25, and I think might be the most shocking result of the weekend, UConn lost to a 6-18 Seton Hall squad on the road as they were up 7 with 30 seconds left. I mean, good grief. It's getting bad over there in Stores, Blake. I mean, Dan Hurley, he was getting all chesty after his win against Creighton, calling fans baldies and pointing to his 2 rings, and then he follows it up with one of, I think, the worst losses of his tenure at UConn.
Yeah, this game was beyond pathetic. They showed no effort that entire game, and it really showed from the tip-off, and they got bullied basically the whole game. They were down 25-22, UConn was at half, and they fought back some in the second half, forced OT, but I mean, it's still pathetic to lose to a 6-18 Seton Hall team who's been just flat out awful all year. Even though it was a road game, you still can't lose that. I mean, freaking Seton Hall was on a 9-game losing streak, and you lose to these guys as a team who's going to be in March Madness. That just can't happen, to put it honest. And
Yep.
I'll talk a little bit more about that game here when we do our trap takeovers, because that's going to be mine.
Yeah, Brandie, Seton Hall, Shaheen Holloway, he brought back that St. Peter's magic for this one and got this one done. I don't think anybody saw this coming. I mean, UConn's not having the year that anybody expected. This is very underwhelming for the standard that Dan Hurley's created with that program. But even still, I mean, this is an egregious loss if you're a Huskies fan.
Right, I agree. And honestly, too, just like how the loss happened, just the steal at the end with 6 seconds left, just kind of a wild ending there. I don't know what to think of this UConn team because Dan Hurley's obviously still an incredible coach, but they're clearly different when Donovan Clingan is not on the team. I feel like that's really what it comes down to. I thought that they were starting to do better with Liam coming back. That Creighton loss happened, or the Creighton win happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, like they're gonna be good again. Yeah, no. This I don't know what to think of this UConn team. If Solo Ball isn't, basically, almost perfect, or if Liam isn't hitting his shots either on offense, there's really not much that they can do or where they can go from there. To me, like, that's their identity. And yeah, this one was a low-scoring game, but UConn has a defensive problem. I don't know if we've talked about that on here, but their defense is really bad. And that's going to show when they play teams that are really good on offense. If they face somebody in the tournament that has an offense to the likes of a Bama, Kentucky, Florida, Auburn type of team, like, they're going to be seeing an early exit because that defense is egregious. It's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned like seeing an Alabama or an Auburn type, like with the offense. That's a very real possibility at this point because they're looking at probably an 8 or 9 seed. I don't have any of the latest bracketology metrics in front of me, but with the way they're trending, they're going to be looking at a higher seed than they may have thought, or a lower seed, excuse me. So it's very well like we're getting into the territory here where first round exit, second round exit. It's not becoming the nightmare scenario anymore. It's becoming what might ultimately be the fate of this team. So they've got a lot of issues to fix, and we've talked about it a bunch. So we won't hit on it much more than that. Kudos to Seton Hall. They got a great quality win. Shaheen Holloway needed that one, but at the same time, I think this says a lot more about just how this UConn team isn't living up to the standard that Dan Hurley set. But some smaller headlines I'll briefly hit on before we move on into our trap takeaways. Arkansas, they lost again in a game where they competed with Texas A&M. That bubble, it's getting closer and closer to popping every day. It's getting a little bit scary over there, and they're going to have to beat somebody they aren't expecting to. And we saw John Calipari. He's starting to feel the pressure there, Blake. I know we saw that video where he was like screaming, "It's not all right," or whatever, that they're losing this game. I think Cal's starting to feel some heat.
And he basically called his players soft, right? Like in that post-game presser. That was wild. I don't think I've seen something like that from Cal in a long time.
Yeah, he said he's got to be careful because he's got some guys in his locker room that are fragile, as he said. So any guesses as to who might be fragile in that locker room? Because I think I have some ideas. If anybody wants to toss it, Blake.
Can I go? Big Z. Yep. Big Z.
Bingo.
That's out of my mind.
Big Z, Billy Richmond, Trevon Brazile. I think those might be the fragile egos that we're talking about.
Brazile is who I would say. So that was my first person.
Yeah, it's not looking good in Arkansas, and they've got to go play the buzzsaw that is Auburn. Brandie, I'm putting some high expectations on your Tigers for that one. I'm expecting at least a 20-point win.
Look, they were already talking in the locker room not even 10 minutes after the win on Saturday about the Arkansas game, and Bruce said Arkansas 3 times in his post-game presser after Alabama, so we're not overlooking it.
He's locked in. Bruce is going to get him ready to go. But other smaller headlines, Mississippi State, they sweep the Egg Bowl in the regular season. They got that one done. Big win for them. They needed that. Michigan State, they blew out Illinois on the road. Illinois, they've been trending in the wrong direction for a little bit now, and they've got to play Duke this weekend. So you got to get right fast if you're Illinois. And then on Sunday, Wichita State, that's a team I haven't mentioned on this podcast probably at all. They put themselves back in the national spotlight, getting their first ranked win against Memphis in 4 years, I think it was. Yeah, 4 years. That's a first ranked win. Blake, Memphis continues to be a very confusing basketball team.
Yeah, I don't know like what to really say about them. All season long, it's not even like a right now issue. All season long, they've had good wins and they've had a couple bad losses. They're sitting at 21-5 right now, but I mean they've still lost games to Arkansas State, Temple on the road, which like what? Like I don't even know how to express my thoughts on that. And then go on the road at Wichita State, a team who's 15-11 and hasn't had a win or a ranked win in 4 years. Like that's pathetic to say the least.
Yeah, Brandie, I feel like this Memphis team is a prime candidate for a first round upset because they're not going to have a great seed with the body of work they're putting here. So it's getting a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, Memphis quite often has this problem where they're the hunted in their conference too. So sometimes like some of those losses I get. Yesterday's though, that was kind of bad. I don't know if you guys saw the play call that was drawn up to go to overtime where Penny Hardaway basically just drew up like a miracle ball Colby Rogers 3. That was like I was like, I don't know why that was what was drawn up. And Colby Rogers is playing against his old team because he used to play at Wichita State. And then they just crumbled in overtime. That to me was like a classic Penny Hardaway type of bad coach game. Like those games where you're like, that game was winnable with better coaching. That is exactly to me like what happened in that game. I don't know what else to say on this Memphis team because I actually really had liked them the last month or so of basketball. I thought they were playing really well, started to do better after that Temple loss, and then this happened, and I was like, I'm off of Memphis again. I still really like Dane Danger. He had a little bit of a weird game yesterday, but I still think he's one of the better big men in the country. So if they end up getting a matchup early in the tournament that allows him to feast in the paint, then maybe they can go on a little bit of a run, but I'm not too high on them, but all going to depend on matchups for them.
Very matchup dependent for Memphis, but let's go ahead and get into the trap takeaways of the weekend. Blake, you jumped the gun on it a little bit earlier, so I'll let you hit lead off here. What was your trap takeaway on the podcast's new favorite Monday ritual?
I hinted towards it, but it's definitely UConn and their lack of effort in a loss against Seton Hall. Dan Hurley, since you're going to show your rings to the Creighton crowd, you need to be able to take criticism instead of blasting podcast people in your post-game conferences. What are you guys doing against a garbage-ass Seton Hall team who is 6-18 on the year? When you have a lottery pick type of talent and Liam McNeely, you have Alex Caravan, who was a part of those 2 national championship games, and you have Solo Ball, who's a 4-star guard out of high school. He's been lighting it up all year. And you also, not to mention, have Aiden Mahaney, who was deemed like a top 3 transfer out of all college basketball, and the guy who they've kind of ruined. I don't know if I want to say ruined, actually. He's kind of did it to himself all year. But that game is just pathetic, especially when you're talking in terms of national championship hopes. Don't mean to toot my own horn, but that team is not winning a national championship. Sully said preseason that they're going to be like a first-round exit. I think I said in like Sweet 16, Elite 8, maybe. Mm-hmm. No, I said Sweet 16, round of 32. But still, this team is not Sweet 16 good at all. That bench is not good. Their starting lineup, it's kind of iffy. It's hit or miss. I mean, they did just beat Marquette not too long ago. This is still a really, like, underwhelming team. Actually, let me scratch that. Not underwhelming. They weren't really good from the start. But, yeah, this is not a really good constructed team. I just feel like Dan Hurley kind of picked some high-level transfers on paper instead of, like, what actually fit. And they didn't really get a high-level center to replace Donovan Clingan. So, yeah. That's that.
Is Dan Hurley a Klingon merchant? Some people are asking that.
Yes,
seen the dialogue. I've seen the dialogue going around on Twitter, but my personal trap takeaway of the weekend wasn't really a team, rather a player, actually. Florida's Micah Ham-Lockton. He returned to Florida this weekend and played 20 minutes. He had that gruesome injury last spring in the SEC tournament. He's burning his medical red shirt, and he's coming back for the Gators. So just wanted to applaud him. That's a good story there. You love to see a guy that suffered a really bad injury come back and get to play the game he loves again. And if he can figure some things out and get into a rhythm, that's another dimension of that Florida team that can start humming, because he's a very quality piece to that lineup. He was a great player for them last year as well. So always glad to see great players getting to come out and play basketball again. Brandie, what was your takeaway of the weekend?
My takeaway of the weekend is that Denver Jones is the best on-ball defender in the country. This is his 3rd preseason All-American player that he has played against this season, and he held Mark Sears to 4 of 17 from the floor. He's also played against Braden Smith and RJ Davis, 2 other preseason All-Americans, and combining all 3 of those together, he held them to 12 of 40 from the floor, which is around 28%. Which is absolutely insane for holding those 3 guys who are all preseason All-Americans, great offensive players, to that level of shooting splits. So that's my takeaway, is that Denver Jones deserves some respect and definitely deserves to be in Defensive Player of the Year conversations, at least for the SEC in the conference. So that would be my number one takeaway. Yeah.
I'm on board with that one. He had a hell of a defensive performance, a masterclass, if you will. But moving on from the weekend that was, we got some games to preview this week to get into. Blake, I'll lead off with you. One of your favorite teams, the Purdue Boilermakers. They're getting back in action. They're getting back in action at Michigan State tomorrow, Tuesday night. This is a very big matchup. I mentioned it earlier, alluded to it, pivotal in the Big Ten race. I'm interested to see what you're feeling on this matchup. What's going to be the keys here? Who's coming out on top?
Like I said earlier, and like I've said all year long, this Purdue team only as good as TKR, Braden Smith, Lawyer are. And this isn't going to be an easy matchup whatsoever. They're going to have to go up against Trey Holloman, who else? Jeremy Fears. Cohen Carr, Jace
Jace
Richardson,
Richardson.
one of the best freshmen in all the country. This ain't going to be an easy game at all. I do favor Michigan State in this one just for the simple fact that I don't think they have they. Oh, excuse me. I don't think they have anyone to stop Jace Richardson with just how good he's been like from the field this year. Braden Smith actually could, but I think Jace Richardson will win this battle, and I think Michigan State's just too hot right now. They just have too many weapons on like from the starting spot all the way to the bench.
Yeah, Blake, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth there. I'm riding with Michigan State on that one for all the reasons that you explained. Brandie, what do you think? Are you going to stick with the Boilermakers here and ride with the team that we put a curse on last weekend, or what's the play here?
Um, well, hopefully we're not cursing Michigan State, but I like Michigan State in this game too. I think Jace Richardson and Cohen Carr are going to be the difference. I do expect Braden Smith to bounce back a little bit. I expect him to have a good offensive game, but not sure how TKR is going to end up doing because I think that Michigan State has a pretty decent front court. So I don't think that if Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith are both not on, I don't think that Purdue's going to be able to fall back on just TKR being there inside and open and getting what he wants, like he has kind of been able to against a lot of Big Ten teams. So I'm gonna go with the Spartans here. Izzo's one of my favorite coaches, so yeah, I'm gonna go with those guys keeping it rolling, especially because of Jace and Cohen, who's I think one of the best dunkers in the country.
Yeah, he's electric. It looks like we lost Blake. I was going to throw it to him, but yeah, we put the curse on Michigan State, it seems. Clean sweep there. But yeah, I just think Michigan State's got too many weapons in this one. I think they're going to get it done. Turning over to the SEC, though, we got Texas A&M. They're going to the hump and playing Mississippi State, a battle of number 7 versus 21. This is a very intriguing one in terms of the SEC table, just seeing how these teams continue to move up and down the food chain. Texas A&M going into this one, I think they're favored. I'm not sure if there's an official line just yet, but you're talking about a battle of two electric guards, Wade Taylor and Josh Hubbard. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that when it comes to scoring and playmaking.
Yeah, I mean, Wade Taylor's a little bit of a shot chucker. So I want to respect Josh Hubbard a little bit more there compared to him. Um, but actually I feel like Texas A&M is a team that not a ton of people are talking about right now. And when people think about really good defensive teams, but maybe not as strong on the offense, everybody always thinks about Tennessee being the strongest type of team in the country like that. But I think it's Texas A&M. The style of play that Buzz puts out there is pesky, gets in your face, makes the guys that you're playing against on offense really pissed off and annoyed. But this game's gonna be interesting because one, Mississippi State's coming off of kind of an emotional win on the road at Ole Miss, and a game that I really didn't foresee happening the way that it did. So kind of a come down game maybe for Mississippi State. And to just I don't know. Like I Mississippi State looked a lot better on offense Saturday against Ole Miss. So they're going to be playing against much better defense, and defense does travel. So I think I'm going to go with Mississippi State though in this one. Just the home teams have been a lot better in the SEC this year. And Mississippi State I think knows that they can kind of be a little bit higher on a seed line than they are now with another statement win, kind of similar to the one that they had this past weekend. So I'm going to go with the Bulldogs here.
Blake, you joined back just in time. We're talking Texas A&M versus Mississippi State, so I'll go ahead and throw it to you. What do you think about this one?
I feel like these two teams play like super similarly to each other. They definitely favor play styles on both ends of the floor, but I think Mississippi State being at man, I can't even talk today. Stark Vegas will be the like eventual deciding factor in this one. Josh Hubbard, he's been kind of inconsistent this year, but I really think this is a game where he can get right against Wade Taylor and Manny Oboski. But yeah, I expect the Bulldogs to win this one in a down to the wire type of game.
I might be putting the curse on the Bulldogs here. This is a tough one. Yeah, I don't know because defense does travel, like Brandie said, and Texas A&M they're holding opponents to 39.6% shooting in the conference, and they're only giving up about 65 points. So part of me thinks that they have the edge in here. Blake, you mentioned the Stark Vegas factor. Mississippi State's 8-4 on their home court this year, so I mean, good record, not the greatest, but that also just speaks to how tough the SEC is and how they've had so many just highly contested battles. They played Bama and Kentucky on their home court, but yeah, Wade Taylor being a shot chucker, like Brandie said. I mean, I've been on that wave since the season started. Everybody knows what I used to think about Wade Taylor. So I do. I'm going to lean with the home court here. I think that really matters in college basketball. I've said it over and over again. So I think Mississippi State gets it done here. Josh Hubbard, I think he's going to win that scoring duel between Wade Taylor and himself. So we'll see how that one pans out. It's definitely going to be a close game, regardless of which way it swings, though. And transition over to the Big Ten on Tuesday. We got Illinois going to Wisconsin. I'm going to make this one short and sweet. I think Wisconsin's going to be too much for Illinois. Illinois is trending downwards at the wrong time. Now, granted, they've had some issues when it comes to injuries and just having all their guys really playing at their best. And when they are clicking, we've seen what they can do. But it's just hard for me to buy stock into this Illinois team right now, especially with the way Wisconsin's playing when it comes to John Tonji, Max Klesmit, and John Blackwell. I just think they've got too much. Brandie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Wisconsin here. Wisconsin might feel a little bit of a hangover from that big win over Purdue, but I just think that Wisconsin's playing better basketball right now. They're on a 4-game win streak. This kind of just sets, I think it's going to set up Wisconsin really well heading into March. Illinois also might be looking ahead to their game Saturday against Duke. And there's just been something that's been off about Illinois lately. I don't know if it's their injury issues that they've had. But something just isn't clicking. They haven't been rebounding as well as of late either. Haven't been shooting the ball as well. So something's a little bit off, and they are a little bit of a younger squad. So maybe it just has to do with not having as fresh of legs like they did kind of beginning, middle of season. So I'm sticking with Wisconsin here, with you, Luke.
Blake, is it going to be the clean sweep for the Badgers here?
Yeah, I hate doing it twice in a row, but yeah, I think Wisconsin pulls this one off. Illinois just lost their leading rebounder. I think he's like top 2 rebounding on the Illinois team. Merez Johnson Jr. He's a freshman and ended up having 17-5 against Michigan State on Saturday. Or Saturday or Sunday, I forget right now, but yeah, him being out is going to be a huge loss. And I just think that John Tonji, John Blackwell, guys like that, Nolan Winter, I think they're just too good of a team right now.
We're agreeing on a lot right now, so that probably means we're going to be wrong on just about everything, knowing the way this podcast pick works. But we'll keep it rolling on into Wednesday. Vandy goes to Kentucky. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet until I know Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson are healthy. I'm not picking Kentucky to win. Vandy's going into Rupp and getting a W. What do you think, Blake?
I think Kentucky actually pulls this one off, even without Lamont. I think this is going to be a big statement win because if they don't have Lamont, then they're going to have to find ways to play without just one guy being their identity and more cohesively as a team. They're going to be at home as well, so I think this is a game where Kobe Bray can get right. Amari Williams should have a quality game. Travis Perry, you better pray to God he has a good game for Kentucky fans, or else that might not go so well with my prediction. But yeah, I still think Kentucky wins this even without Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler.
You mentioned Amari Williams. He's been hooping lately. I got to give him some credit. He started to kind of realize that he's a physical specimen and can kind of enforce his will on SEC bigs. But Brandie, what do you think? You think my Cats are going to pull one off here, or is it going to be another story where injuries are just going to be too much to overcome? I think that if they are injured and find a way to win this game, it's going to be because Kobe Bray has stepped up and had a big performance. But I'm not willing to bet on that right now. I just can't make the commitment.
Yeah, a little bit of a revenge spot from earlier in the season for Kentucky here, and that boded well when they played Tennessee again. I think I'm going to go with Kentucky here, home factor. Vanderbilt, even though they haven't really been winning as much, they still are playing really good basketball. They're very, very well coached team. Jason Edwards has been incredible for their guard room, and they just don't have a ton of size necessarily, though. Inside, Kentucky really right now doesn't necessarily have that either. But I think being at home, this is just a spot where Kentucky has to find a way to win this game, whether they have injuries or not. And this is probably a good team to be able to do it against. I think if you can just Vanderbilt doesn't really push the pace from an offensive perspective because they don't have that firepower to keep up, and they're a little bit turnover prone when their freshman gets on the floor. So I'm gonna go Kentucky in this one. But I don't know if it's really from like a pure basketball standpoint, more so just being home, revenge factor, and they need to win this game. And I could see Mark Binghamton potentially out coaching Pope in this game. Like to me, they should have won that game. I don't know if you guys watched that Tennessee game on Saturday. Vanderbilt should have beaten Tennessee. And so I still like this Vanderbilt team. I want to see them in March, and I want to see them get in the tournament. And so they may be a little bit desperate to get a win from that standpoint. I just don't know if they'll have the chance to do that against Kentucky. So I think I'm going to stick with the Wildcats here. Feels like a good get right spot for UK.
Well, for my sanity, I hope that you are right. Unfortunately, I don't see it happening where we stand right now. I got to see some injury reports in front of me before I jump that far. Yeah. But Arkansas at Auburn on Wednesday. I'll just go ahead and speak for everyone. Auburn's winning this game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think there's much
discussion to be said about.
Hey, Calipari has Bruce Pearl's number though, so I could see Arkansas coming out. I could see them coming out a little hot. I mean, right now Auburn's the hunted, and Arkansas still has some talent on their team, but they're not going to have the depth to be able to keep up, especially not on a weekday game in the jungle. Yeah, Auburn's winning this game, but it may not be as easy, at least for the first half of the game. I think Arkansas might come out a little bit fired up.
We got a fragile locker room and a team that's desperate. I don't know if that's the greatest mix in the world, so I'm expecting Auburn to come out and just dominate, do what they do. But one of the more intriguing SEC games of the week on Wednesday, Alabama, they're going to Missouri, number 4 versus number 15. Blake, this could be a trap spot here for Alabama. They're coming off the emotional loss. Obviously, Coleman Coliseum was rocking. Huge game set up there, and things didn't go the way that they planned. You could see a possible hangover effect here because this Missouri team, they can't mess around or they're going to get beat.
Yeah, I got a feeling Missouri pulls this one off just because of the fact that Alabama's coming off a really hard-fought game against Auburn. And Missouri's been really top-notch on the defensive end all season long. Caleb Grill does have to have a big game, though, I think, if they want to win this, as well as Ant Robinson. But, man, I don't know if I want to flat out say Missouri's going to win, though, just because of how good Alabama's been. Yeah, you know what? I'll be the lone person to do it. Missouri's winning this game. Sorry, Roll Tide fans.
Brandie, what do you think? You think Alabama's going to get their revenge here after coming off the disappointment, get their confidence going again?
Alabama to me kind of sometimes plays better on the road than they do at home. And I actually really like this Missouri team, though. They've been really impressive lately. Caleb Grill to me, if he was healthy all season, would be first team all SEC. And Missouri actually rebounds really well so that they can match Alabama in that regard. And they have a ton of length and size on that squad. I'm gonna go with Missouri here. I just think that this Missouri squad is legit and they're not being talked about. People just aren't talking about them for whatever reason. They're finding ways to win games. They're pretty decent from behind the arc this year. Totally different team than they were last year. As long as Dennis Gates gives his starting lineup to the scorekeeper before the game starts. So Missouri's winning. I don't know if you guys saw that on Saturday in the Georgia game.
Yeah, I did see that.
So, but
That's
yeah,
still
I'm going to take Missouri here. I think they actually match up really well against Alabama. I think from an athleticism standpoint, outside of Auburn and Florida, Missouri and Alabama, like to me, are the four most athletic teams in the conference. So I'm going to go with Missouri here.
well, Blake. You thought that you were going to be the lone wolf picking Missouri. It looks like I'm the lone wolf picking Alabama. I can't bet against this Alabama team. In the preseason, I liked them so much, and they've lived up to the expectations. That was a tough loss on Saturday, but this Alabama team, I mean, they're just so deep, and I just think they're going to have too much. They're going to overwhelm Missouri, but Missouri is very quality. I think it's going to be a close game, and then it's just going to be too much in the end. I think guys like Mark Sears or even an Aiden Holloway, they're just going to make the shots down the stretch they need. Maybe Grant Nelson gets things going in the paint. We'll see. But I think Alabama, I just like them too much. And I think that they're going to be prepared. Nate Oates is going to have them fired up after they lost one on Saturday where they really probably think that they could have stole an opportunity there in front of a raucous home crowd. But we'll see. Maybe I'll be wrong. I could definitely see Missouri taking this one, but I also just like Alabama too much to go against them. But to cap off the week preview on Friday, this is one of the more marquee games of the week as well. Big Ten, Michigan State. We talked about them once already. They're going to have two pretty big tests this week. They're traveling to Michigan after hosting Purdue on Tuesday. This is one of the better games on slate for the week. Blake, you think Michigan State's going to go 2-0 here in this stretch, or is one of these games bound to be a stumble for them? I know you picked them in the first prediction we had for them. You think Michigan catches them here?
Yeah, I think Michigan pulls this one off. I just think that front court is just too deadly. Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf have been one of the most entertaining front courts in the sport of basketball this year. Then you add in Trey Donaldson, Amari Burnett, those guys in the backcourt that have provided valuable minutes all year. I just think they end up pulling this one off, especially with them being in front of the crowd at Ann Arbor.
I think Michigan gets it done as well. Brandie, what do you think here?
Oh man. This one is gonna be, I think this is probably the best Michigan State rivalry matchup we've seen in probably like 5 years or
Long
so.
time, yeah.
Yeah, maybe even more than like it's a long time. This one to me feels like a game that's gonna be both teams going blow for blow, and it's gonna come down to the wire type of game. I hate to put the curse on Michigan, but I've been a little high on this Michigan team all season, even before conference play. My dog Trey Donaldson continues to ball out for them. And just the combo of Danny Wolf and Golden, like Blake said, like it's hard to stop and hard to guard. And Michigan State has a solid defense, so it'll be interesting to see how Wolf plays against their defense. To me, Golden isn't as scary. He's just really big. I think he's the type of player that everybody wanted Zach Edey to be because people hated on Zach Edey a lot, but Edey was actually a very skilled big. To me, Golden is not a skilled big. He's just kind of a massive presence there. So it'll be interesting to see how Jace Richardson finds a way to, get some scoring with that front court, but also how Danny Wolf kind of does against the Michigan State defense. So I think I got to go with Michigan here, though. I've been high on them all season, and I want to continue to support that squad. And I think that it's going to end up being one of the best games of the week match, I guess, because it's on Friday. So
No, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Brandie is calling Vlad Golden a hype merchant. We've got the
he
allegations.
is. If you
thrown
watch
out
him,
there.
he just stands there and waits for Danny Wolf to dish to him. And look, people said that about Zach Edey, that he was a hype merchant and that he was a foul merchant, but Zach Edey's actually skilled and he's starting on an NBA roster, and I don't know if we'll be able to say the same about Golden. So, just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're probably right on that. But yeah, that's an episode, guys. We agreed on quite a bit in these predictions, so I'm just ready to watch these all ultimately crumble. Hopefully they make us look good, though. That's kind of been a rarity on this podcast in the past. But we'll see how this week unfolds. It's going to be a big one. We'll be back to talk the weekend action in the coming days. But for now, Luke, Blake, and Brandie signing off.